Only 4 countries in our world have stealth fighter jets. India is not one of them, but Pakistan is set to join the club. Because reports say China is giving its latest jets to Pakistan. What does it mean for New Delhi? And do these Chinese planes match the hype surrounding them? Tonight we'll discuss. In West Asia, a lesson on how to act and dress the part. Syria's new leader, who once fought for Al-Qaeda and ISIS, is now repackaging himself and the world is lining up to meet him. The global auto market is in a churn. Who is winning and what does it mean for you? After wanting to turn Canada into an American state and demanding the return of the Panama Canal, Donald Trump now wants to buy Greenland. But can he? How the UAE has become the biggest investor in Africa, why Poland is teaching school children how to fire a gun, why Indian schools are debating whether children should be failed before class 8, why the Parker solar mission is breaking records, and how work from home is increasingly only for the rich. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. French far-right leader Marine Le Pen predicts an early presidential election. She says President Emmanuel Macron is quote-unquote finished and the days of the present government are numbered. Macron has vowed to stay in office till his term ends in 2027, but France has been mired in political turmoil since Macron called snap elections this summer. A Russian state-owned cargo ship sinks in the Mediterranean Sea. This incident took place after an explosion on board. 2 crew members are missing, while 14 others have been rescued. 2 weeks ago, a Russian tanker sank near Moscow annexed Crimea. Hong Kong police issue fresh bounties for 6 democracy advocates based overseas. They're offering 1 million Hong Kong dollars for information on these activists. Political dissent in Hong Kong has been quashed since 2020 when China imposed a sweeping national security law after pro-democracy protests. Somalia accuses Ethiopia of a deadly attack on its troops. This incident threatens to upend a deal brokered by Turkey less than 2 weeks ago. The accord sought to end a nearly year-long dispute between Somalia and Ethiopia. The conflict started when Ethiopia signed an agreement with Somaliland, which is a breakaway region of Somalia. An Indian shooter, Manu Bhaker, reacts to her Khel Ratna controversy. Her name was excluded from the list of nominees for the award. Bhaker says that there could have been a lapse on her part while filing the nomination. She is the first Indian athlete since independence to win 2 Olympic medals in a single edition of the Games. Our lead story tonight features Pakistan, a country that is broke, surviving on loans and bailouts and struggling to pay its bills. That's Pakistan minus its military. While the rest of the country is cash-strapped, the Pakistani military keeps cutting new checks. They're working on a new defense deal with China, a deal to buy Chinese fighter jets. A Pakistani broadcaster reported this last week, and this is not a new claim. It's been doing the rounds for months now. The Pakistani Air Force has an aging fleet. They want an upgrade. They have a bunch of American F-16s and the French Mirage aircraft. These are all old planes. Pakistan wants to replace them with new Chinese jets. We're talking about the J-35 jets from China. Pakistan wants to buy 40 planes. And this is the latest model, the J-35. There's a lot of hype around it. The world got the first glimpse of this plane only last month. The J-35 looks a lot like the American F-35 jet. China has been talking up its stealth capabilities. Apparently, this plane can escape radars. It is hard to detect. It can easily penetrate the defenses of the enemy. They won't see the plane coming, or so Beijing claims. And that is why Pakistan wants it. If this deal goes through, Pakistan will be China's first customer for this jet. They've been eyeing the jets for months. In January this year, a statement came out from Pakistan's Air Chief Marshal. His name is Zahir Sindhu. He said the foundation, and I'm quoting, the foundation for acquiring a Chinese stealth fighter had already been laid. And soon these planes will become a part of Pakistan's fleet. I'll translate that for you. Soon here means 2 years. It could take 2 years for Pakistan to get the planes. That is what local reports say. But all of these reports skip the most important detail. Who will pay the bill? How will Pakistan buy these jets? Will Beijing finance it? Will Islamabad take another loan from China? We don't know any of it. But by all indications, the money won't be a problem. China and Pakistan, after all, call themselves iron brothers. Their militaries are close collaborators. Pakistan already has 2 Chinese jets in its fleet, the J-10 and the JF-17. In fact, China and Pakistan developed the JF-17 together, so they could work out a similar arrangement for the J-35, this latest jet. And this deal suits China too. Their aim is quite clear: to alter the regional balance of power, to challenge India. Because as of today, India does not have jets with stealth capabilities. The J-35 is what experts call a 5th generation fighter jet. It's a new class of aircraft, the most advanced technologically. They have stealth capabilities. They can fly at supersonic speeds. And the weapons on these planes can strike with precision. So how many countries have a 5th generation fighter jet? Just 4. The United States, Russia, South Korea and China. And Pakistan, like we've been telling you, wants to join this club. What about India? Well, India is trying to build its own 5th generation fighter. The project is called AMCA, the Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft. The DRDO is developing this jet. That's the Defence Research and Development Organization. It is part of India's Defence Ministry. The DRDO develops cutting-edge defence technologies and weapons, and now it is working on the ACMA. But it's going to take time. The Indian Air Force may not get these jets before the next decade, which should not come as a surprise, because the technology behind a 5th generation fighter is difficult to crack. Pakistan knows this. Pakistan knows that the Indian jet will not be ready anytime soon, so it is leveraging its ties with China and trying to win this race. But there's a catch. Like I said, the Chinese jets are generating a lot of hype, even though the world knows very little about them. Their capabilities remain untested. Experts say the jets are like a black box, the J-35 jets. They have doubts about the efficacy. They don't know if China has truly mastered the technology. It is not clear how powerful the engines are or how good the stealth capabilities are. And can these planes truly evade radars? No one can say for sure. Having said that, India cannot afford to be complacent. Despite doubts about Chinese technology, they keep arming Pakistan with advanced weapons. And this poses clear security risks for India. The only way to counter this is to accelerate our own modernization efforts. The Indian Air Force urgently needs upgrades. Going by one estimate, the IAF needs at least 400 more jets. So we need to speed up the acquisitions and ramp up domestic manufacturing. The idea to build our own 5th generation fighter jet is commendable. It is a crucial step towards making India self-reliant in defence, but we must remember that such projects need speed as much as precision. Speed is equally important. Consider what's happening with the Tejas project. Tejas is India's homegrown fighter jet. The plane was designed to replace the aging fleet of MiG aircraft. But the project has run into delays. There are production challenges. All of this compromises India's defence preparedness. Recent wars in Ukraine and West Asia have shown that in modern conflicts, air power is critical. So India must act on this urgently. What matters the most in geopolitics? You could say policy or ideology or maybe public statements. But we say equally important is appearance. It can send the biggest signals. Just look at Syria's new leader, Ahmad al-Shara, aka Jolani. Look at his transformation over the years. In 2016, he was a typical jihadist leader, white turban and a long shaggy beard. Once the rebels were beaten back, he disappeared. He worked mostly in the shadows. But late in November this year, he appeared again, this time in a different avatar. The white turban was gone. Instead, Jolani opted for military fatigues, quite similar to Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. This was last month. Cut to late December, he is a ruler, the man who overthrew Bashar al-Assad. So even the military fatigues are gone now. Jolani is turning up in a suit and tie. He's basically repackaged himself to suit the role. And this transformation is quite remarkable. We're talking about a man who fought for Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, two of the biggest terrorist groups in the world. So on paper, he should be a pariah. Yet look at how the world is quoting him. On Monday, he met ministers from Jordan and Qatar. Jordan promised to help Syria rebuild. Qatar agreed to invest in Syria's energy sector.
The Qatari side has voiced its readiness to begin large-scale investments on Syrian land in all fields, most importantly in the energy sector where they have a high level of expertise on the global stage, but also in ports and airports and so forth.
Before this, on Sunday, Jolani had other visitors. The first was a Druze leader from Lebanon. The Druze, as you would know, is an Arab minority. The Druze live in Lebanon, Israel, Syria and Jordan. By hosting a leader from this community, Jolani was trying to send a message that minorities will be safe in Syria. After this, he hosted the foreign minister of Turkey. And once again, Jolani was promised support. Turkey said that sanctions on Syria should be lifted and there should be swift rebuilding.
Lifting sanctions against Syria is of the utmost importance for the normalization of Syria and for security to be established in the country. The necessary preparations needs to begin immediately regarding rebuilding Syria.
It's almost like Jolani won an election because everyone is racing to get an audience. The Arabs, the Turks, the Europeans, the British, the Americans. Last week, a US delegation met Jolani. They said the talks were good and productive. Jolani promised that terror groups would be driven out of Syria. In return, the US lifted the bounty on him. Washington had $10 million on Jolani's head. Now that bounty is gone. Just think about how absurd this is. A terrorist is promising to crack down on terrorism. And this should sound familiar because the Taliban said the same thing in 2021. After capturing Kabul, they promised to drive out Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. Back then, the world was more cautious. But in Syria, they're buying it hook, line and sinker. The question is why? A big reason is Syria's strategic value, its energy reserves, its location next to Israel, and its new rivalry with Iran and Russia. All of this makes the new Syrian regime more appealing to the West and some Arab players. But that's not the only reason. Jolani's tactics have made the rebels more palatable, more acceptable. He's given interviews to the BBC and CNN. He's invited journalists to his office in Damascus, and he made sure to say the right things.
Syria is exhausted by wars, and we now need to strengthen and grow Syria and create prosperity within it. So there should be no plans for an aggressive Syria at all. As I have said on many occasions, Syria now does not pose any danger or threat to any country in the world.
He says all minorities are welcome, even the Kurds. And this is significant. Remember, the Kurdish groups are supported by the US. They control land in Syria's northeast. During the last decade, the Kurds and the rebels fought each other. But now Jolani is extending an olive branch. He says, surrender your weapons, join our peace talks, and let's rebuild Syria together. This is exactly what the world wants to hear. But will Jolani follow through? Today we saw some worrying pictures. Islamists burnt a Christmas tree near the city of Hama. Take a look. Jolani's men say the attackers were not Syrian. They have promised to capture them. They have also promised to restore and light the tree by tomorrow morning. Let's see if they live up to their words. And frankly, that should be everyone's strategy. Wait, watch, confirm, then reach out. Not rush in to embrace a man who fought for Al-Qaeda. But if you're Jolani, well, congratulations, you have clearly cracked the code. If you want a job, just dress and act the part. Let's take a drive down memory lane all the way back to the 1950s. Back then, Detroit was the richest city in the world. You had massive factories, architectural marvels, and plush residential zones. All of it built from the auto industry. Cut to 2013, Detroit filed for bankruptcy. Today it's called a ghost city, a mere shadow of its glorious past. The reason? America's car industry was defeated. As European automakers surged ahead, Detroit lost out. Now, the moral of the story is simple. Every few decades, the auto industry goes through a churn. Maybe a new technology comes in or a new production strategy is adopted. The result is a global economic overhaul. Thousands of jobs disappear, cities are abandoned, and companies adapt or perish. It looks like the churn is upon us again, all thanks to electric vehicles or EVs. The European brands were stuck on nostalgia. They could not fathom a future without fossil fuel. But the US and China did. The US let private companies do their thing and China went one step ahead. They realized the strategic importance of EVs. So here's what they did. First, Beijing monopolized the battery technology. Today, 85 to 95% of battery components are made by China. They also have 70% of the world's lithium refining capacity. China has deals with countries across Latin America and Africa. They have exclusive rights to minerals like lithium. Like I said, they monopolized it. Secondly, they subsidized EV makers, car companies. Reports say Chinese firms got $231 billion in incentives. This is from 2009 to 2022. So China's EV revolution was not an accident. It was delicately planned. Today, most EV makers are forced to buy batteries from China. If you add the subsidies, it's a massive edge. And when did the West wake up to all of this? Probably after the pandemic. In 2022, Joe Biden made the first move. He started giving tax breaks to people who bought American EVs. Around $7,500. But even after this discount, Chinese EVs were cheaper in the US. So in 2024, Biden made a second move. He imposed a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs. Basically, EVs imported from China cost twice as much in America. The idea was to make American cars more attractive. Soon, the European Union followed suit. In October this year, they imposed a 45% tariff on Chinese EVs, and looks like it is working. Let me show you some numbers from November. China's EV exports have fallen to their lowest level since July 2022. Compared to last year, sales are down by 42%. Clearly, the EU tariffs are biting because China's EV exports to the European Union fell by 36%. These numbers have caused panic in Beijing. Some automakers are trying to pivot from EVs to hybrids. What are hybrids? These are cars that run on both batteries and fuel. More importantly, hybrids do not have that 45% tariff in Europe, so Chinese firms are pivoting. But here's the problem. Western tariffs are not China's only threat. In the East, a new giant is rising. Honda and Nissan have agreed to merge their companies. Both are iconic brands in Japan. Nissan needed someone to bail them out. As for Honda, it was more about taking on China. They're getting hammered in the Chinese market, so Honda needs all the firepower they can get.
There is a rise of Chinese power and emerging forces, and the structure of the automobile industry is changing. What this means is that I believe that the value itself in terms of automobiles and mobility will change.
The merger will be done by 2026. It will create the third largest auto company in the world, but will it be enough to beat the Chinese? Frankly, no one knows. The world has committed to shifting away from fossil fuels. The future is electric vehicles. Countries may try to shut out Chinese EVs, but it's not a silver bullet. Because at the end of the day, consumers don't care about the geopolitics of cars. All they want is affordable and efficient machines. And who's making those right now? China. So governments across the world need to do more than just impose tariffs. They need to invest in their domestic EV makers because the future of the auto industry is at stake here. We cannot allow it to become a Chinese monopoly. Greenland. It's the world's largest island, but don't be fooled by the name. There is nothing green about Greenland. 80% of the island is covered in ice. Greenland is an autonomous Danish territory. It is self-ruled. It has its own government and its own parliament. It takes care of itself and has not bothered anyone yet. But now one person has a problem with this arrangement, and that is Donald Trump, the US president-elect. He wants Greenland. It's exactly how it sounds. Trump wants America to own this island. He posted about it on his social media platform Truth Social. Let me quote from the post. This is what Donald Trump said. The purpose of national security and freedom throughout the world, for purposes of national security and freedom throughout the world, the United States of America feels that the ownership and control of Greenland is an absolute necessity. So Trump wants to occupy Greenland, and this is not a new whim. He first spoke about it in 2019. He said the US should acquire Greenland. And that led to a very sharp rebuke. Denmark called the idea absurd. So Trump, being Trump, cancelled his state visit to Denmark. And while he has a lot of firsts to his name, he's not the first American president to suggest this. In 1946, when the Second World War had ended, Harry S. Truman was the US president. He made an offer to Denmark, an offer of $100 million to buy Greenland. He also proposed a barter, a few parts of Alaska in exchange for some of Greenland. Truman found no takers. Then in 1987, the idea was floated again, this time by the US State Department. They said that Greenland was ideal for acquisition, but they made no formal effort to actually do it. And now in 2024, we are back to it, which also begs the question, why does the US want Greenland? What's so special about it? The most obvious plus is the location. Greenland is located in the North Atlantic Ocean between Europe and North America. At the start of the Cold War, the US established a base there. It was called the Thule Air Base. It's still there, but now it has a new name. It's called the Bidufik Space Base. Greenland's location makes it strategically important. The US can monitor missiles from here, especially those coming from Russia or China. It can also launch missiles from this location. That's one reason why the Americans want it. The second reason is the Arctic race. Thanks to global warming, the world is heating up, the ice is melting, so the Arctic is no longer inaccessible. New waterways are emerging every day. The US wants control there. It wants to boost its presence. It wants to play a bigger role in the Arctic, and Greenland gives it that vantage point. The third reason why they want it is Greenland's natural resources. This island is rich in rare earth minerals like uranium, scandium, and neodymium. They're used to make electric vehicles, mobile phones, and other electronics. These minerals are strategic resources, which is why the US is eyeing Greenland. But the island is having none of it. Here's what Greenland's Prime Minister said, and I'm quoting again, "We must not lose our long struggle for freedom. We are not for sale, and we will not be for sale. That's a spanner in the works for Donald Trump. Greenland is not up for sale, so Trump will have to focus on something else for the moment. He has a long shopping list. Earlier this month, he wanted Canada. He wanted the country to become the 51st US state. That did not go well with the Canadians or their Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, whom Trump called Governor Trudeau. So Trump turned southwards. This week, he said he wanted the Panama Canal. It's a waterway made by the US, but for a quarter of a century, it's been controlled by Panama. Trump does not care, though. He wants it back. At this rate, he'll beat Xi Jinping, claiming the sovereign territory of others left, right and centre. And we must say this, had any other country been doing this, it would have been called an expansionist plot. The US would have been up in arms. They would have announced sanctions or rushed their military. But when Donald Trump says it, no one bats an eyelid. Like it's the new normal. It doesn't change the facts, though. Greenland is not up for sale. Canada is a separate country. And Panama is not returning the canal. Donald Trump should try asking for Mars. Maybe his BFF Elon Musk will cut him a deal.
मैं यहाँ से अपनी गाड़ी में गई इस्लामाबाद, वहाँ पे जो भेजने वाले था पेडलर जो था, मैंने उसको गाड़ी की चाबी हाथ में थमा दी। मैंने वहाँ पे उससे 50 ग्राम लिए और मैंने गाड़ी उसको वहाँ पे छोड़ दी। वहाँ से मैं हीरोइन लाती थी। इवन के मतलब कोई भी ऐसी चीज़ नहीं होगी, मतलब इतना ये इंसान को मजबूर करता है ना कि मतलब हेल्पलेस इंसान इतना हो जाता है।
मैं आपको पर्टिकुलरली तो नहीं बोल सकता हूँ किसी कारणवश, बट ये है कि हाँ, महिलाओं के जरिए जो गाँव आगे हैं, वहाँ से कहीं ना कहीं से महिलाओं के जरिए आता है पीछे। ड्रग्स पे जितना कंट्रोल हो सके, जितना नहीं पूरा कंप्लीटली कंट्रोल होना चाहिए।
Are women easy drug mules? Are agencies less suspecting of women peddling drugs? Mere coincidence or a conspiracy? The pattern is definitely concerning, one that our security agencies are not neglecting. CNN News 18 reported in early 2024 on Pakistan's role in pushing narcotics into Jammu and Kashmir, highlighting involvement of overground workers in recruiting for this trade.
चाहे वो बच्चे हैं, चाहे वो औरतें हैं, चाहे कैसे भी करते हैं, उनको पता है आपके कोई भी हमारा दाव पेच जो भी है, उन्होंने हम सब भी हथकंडे इस्तेमाल किए, लेकिन इंशाल्लाह वो फेल रहे। ये जो यूथ है तो इसको भी उकसाने का मसला है। कोई स्कूल से है, कोई कॉलेज से है, कोई कहीं से है, किसी को पता ही नहीं होता, सिर्फ पैसों की लालच है।
Despite visible law enforcement actions, drug syndicates continue adopting new methods. This time around, we visited areas like Rajouri, Poonch, Doga, Anantnag and Baramulla that are revealing a significant trend: increasing participation of women in the illegal narcotics trade.
मिलिटेंटों को और उनके भेजने वालों को ये मालूम है कि हिंदुस्तान से जम्मू कश्मीर को पाकिस्तान नहीं छीन सकता। इस सब के लिए यहाँ का आदमी चाहिए और यहाँ का आदमी उनके साथ वही जा सकता है जो कहीं मजबूर होता है। मिलिटेंट हमारे लिए इतना नुकसानदेह नहीं है जितना हमारे घर का एक लड़का भी अगर इस नशे की लत में फंस गया तो वो बगैर गोली के पूरी फैमिली को मार सकता है।
महिलाएं एक आसान सा टारगेट है और वो ये काम करती हैं, मगर हमारी पुलिस और ये जो एजेंसियां हैं ये पूरी तरीके से चौकन्ना है।
Since 2023, 3,190 cases have been registered and 4,536 individuals arrested in Jammu and Kashmir's crackdown on illegal narcotics. To disrupt supply chains, authorities invoked the PIT-ND
Our next story is from Africa. For years, the continent was carved up. Western powers came, they colonized, they exploited. It was called the Scramble for Africa. It left the continent impoverished. They're still recovering from it. And now a new scramble for power is on. This time, they're coming as investors and security providers. The US, China, Russia, they all want a piece of Africa. They all want influence, mineral wealth, and the market. And now they have a new power to contend with. The United Arab Emirates, the UAE. The UAE has become the biggest investor in Africa. In the last few years, it has announced dozens of projects. Between 2019 and 2023, the UAE has invested $110 billion in Africa, which is way more than the traditional players like France and China. These countries have not invested even half of that amount, especially in the recent years. The UAE is beating them. And it's not a sudden phenomenon. The Emirates have long had a footprint in Africa. It began in the early 2000s. The first area of control was ports, starting with DP World. It's a company controlled by Dubai's royal family. DP World manages 6 ports in Africa and plans to build 2 more. Then we have Abu Dhabi. It has managed a port in Guinea since 2013. After ports, it was airlines, like Dubai-owned carrier Emirates. It operates flights to 20 African nations. This was followed by investments in mining. In 2021, Zambia's state mining company took over debt-laden mines, and they were looking for investors. The UAE spotted an opportunity. It paid $1.1 billion to Zambia and took a 51% stake in these mines. In 2022, Dubai struck deals to sell carbon credits from forests. The list included a lot of countries like Zimbabwe, Liberia, and Tanzania. So airlines, ports, mines, agriculture, the UAE is everywhere in Africa. It has multiple investments. It is pouring billions of dollars. And what is it getting in return? Are these investments reaping any benefits? Honestly, it's a bit early for that. Some projects have just been announced, others have just started, and still others have hit a snag. Like a $2 billion investment by Masdar. It ran into financial problems, investments were delayed, and these are just some of the challenges. There are other concerns as well, like reports of illegally smuggled gold being moved from Africa to Dubai. Reports suggest $35 billion worth of gold goes undeclared in Africa every year. And where does the gold go? It is smuggled out of the continent. 85% of the smuggled gold reportedly goes to the UAE. In the last 10 years, Abu Dhabi is said to have received $115 billion worth of smuggled gold. Despite all of this, the UAE remains a key player in Africa. They've long had a political role, especially in conflicts in Libya and the Sudan. Now they want to be an economic player as well. And they're using the age-old strategy, expanding influence by offering economic assistance. Come in with billions, offer aid, and then stick around for the resources. That's basically what most global powers are doing in Africa. Now that the UAE is stealing the march on them, how will they take it? Will the Emirati projects create real change on the ground, or is this just modern-day land grab disguised as development? Either way, one thing is clear, Africa remains a coveted prize in the global game of influence. And now let's shift our attention to Poland, a country which has been on high alert since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. It's because of where Poland is located. It shares an 800-kilometer-long border with Russia and Belarus. It is also the linchpin of NATO's strategy to defend Ukraine and deter Russia. Poland is critical to all of this. And that also puts Poland at significant risk. If a wider war breaks out, Poland would be the most vulnerable target. And this seems to have spooked Warsaw, so much so that it is now asking school children to learn how to fire a gun. We are talking about children as young as 14. Why is Poland asking them to learn how to fire a gun? Our next report tells you.
Ever since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, Poland has been on edge. It has boosted its defense spending, ramped up the recruitment of troops, and started a program to fortify its borders. For most countries, these measures would be enough to deal with an enemy, but not for Poland. It now wants school children to learn how to fire a weapon. Yes, it's a real thing. Children as young as 14 are now required to take gun training lessons. The Polish government has made firearms training mandatory. So, how does it work? Students need to dedicate 1 hour per week to this training. The curriculum includes more than just shooting. Students also learn how to disassemble and assemble a weapon. Thankfully, no live ammunition is used, and instead the students train with laser guns. But it doesn't end there. This curriculum also requires students to learn about their local area. It also includes lessons on cybersecurity. These measures may sound extreme, but Poland feels they are necessary. Last year, Poland's army chief issued a stark warning. He said Poland must prepare for an all-out war. The reason lies in its geography. Poland shares an 800-kilometer border with Russia and Belarus. Warsaw has intensified efforts to secure this frontier.
The better the Polish border is guarded, the more difficult it is to access for those with bad intentions, the greater the guarantees of maintaining peace. Everything we are doing here, and we will also be doing this on the border with Belarus and Ukraine, is to deter and discourage a potential aggressor, which is why it is truly an investment in peace.
But Poland feels that's not enough to take on Russia. So it's engaging with citizens and rolling out special programs to build better deterrence like holidays with the army. Again, this program is targeted at school students. This is a summer program for high schoolers where students are given basic military training. The adults are increasingly turning to gun ownership. This year, Poland has witnessed a sharp rise in weapons permits. The European country allows citizens to own firearms, but the rules are quite strict. No one below 21 years of age can own a gun. To obtain a permit, they must appear for a psychological exam, complete a firearms training course, and pass a comprehensive background check. This includes a review of their criminal and mental health records. Russia's actions in Ukraine have forced Europe to prioritize its security. And Poland's tough measures highlight the extent of its anxiety.
India has just amended a key part of its education policy, the part about failing students. Until now, students could not be failed in primary school, that's from classes 1 to 8. All students had to be automatically promoted from class 1 to 8. It was called the no detention policy. But now the government has reversed it. The new policy allows schools to fail students in 2 classes, in classes 5 and 8. If you fail the annual exam, you are in the dock, you get 2 months to retake the test, and if you fail again, you will be held back in the same class. I know this policy change may sound confusing, so let's break it down into 4 parts. Number 1, will this change affect all Indian students? And the answer is no. It will only affect students in central schools like Kendriya Vidyalayas and Sainik schools. States are free to choose their own policy. For example, Tamil Nadu says that it will stick to no detention. It will not fail students. Now, point number 2. Why was no detention introduced in the first place? It was clubbed with the Right to Education Act of 2009. The then government said that every child must complete primary school, and detentions threatened that goal. Assume a child was failed in class 6 or class 7. Their parents may ask, what's the point of keeping them in school? Might as well train them in the family work. Or sometimes a child does not want the stigma of being failed or having to study with their juniors. So the child may say, I don't want to study anymore. To prevent all of this, the government said no more detentions. Every child will be passed until class 8. They will be promoted to the next class. And on paper, this did work. In 2008, around 5.7% children did not go to school. By 2022, this figure dropped to 2.3%. So school enrollment did rise because of this law. Now, question number 3. Why has the government reversed it? Because enrollment does not ensure quality. Around 6.5 million students failed classes 10 and 12 last year. So you're not preventing the detention, you're just delaying it. Let me show you a comparison data. In 2008, 56% of class 5 students could read textbooks from class 2. By 2022, that number had come down to 43%, meaning more than half of class 5 students could not read textbooks from class 2. Same with basic maths. In 2008, around 37% class 5 students could do division. By 2022, that number fell to 25%. Do you see the problem here? Yes, more students are staying in school until class 8, but are they learning? The academic quality has dropped. The government says this needs to be corrected. They have created new rules for detained students. The class teacher will guide them, the parents will be roped in, and specialized inputs will be given. The idea is to identify and correct the learning gaps then and there. Which brings us to the final question. Is this the right approach for India? Well, some educators have welcomed it. They say that it will encourage students to study well because if they don't, they will fail. And frankly, that does sound like good incentive to study. But there are critics as well. And we must listen to them too. They point to the same problems that existed in 2009, the problem of stigma, the problem of dropouts. Different countries have found different solutions for this. In the US, it's up to the states. Around 26 American states have policies to hold back students if they fail reading tests. They will be failed. It's common in the European Union too. Around 7% teens repeated at least 1 year in primary education. Around 10% did the same in lower secondary. They repeated a class. Western experts say this can be counterproductive. They say repeaters suffer long-term negative impacts. But remember, India's situation is different. We cannot copy-paste Western advice to Indian schools. We need a holistic approach that is tailored for India. Because unlike the West, our infrastructure is not adequate. We have other problems. Around 120,000 Indian schools, listen to this, 120,000 Indian schools have just one teacher. Imagine that, an entire school with just one teacher. In states like Bihar, there is just one teacher for 60 students in a class. Frankly, these things have a bigger bearing on a student's success, way more than holding them back. So we'll have to wait and see how this policy plays out. If it can improve academic quality, great. But if it comes at the cost of enrollment, we may want to reconsider it. Now let's talk about the Parker Solar Probe. It's a spacecraft that has just made history. It has come closer to the sun than any spacecraft has ever before. Parker is the fastest object ever made. It flew at the speed of about 7,000 kilometers per hour. Do you know how fast that is? Fast enough to fly you from London to New York within 30 seconds. Parker flew at this blistering speed. It braved radiation and soaring temperatures to touch the sun. But why did it need to? Why is Parker's record-breaking feat important to us? And what does it tell us about the sun? Here is a report.
This Christmas Eve, a vehicle travelled around a celestial object at an unfathomable speed. And it brought immense joy to many people. We're not talking about Santa's sleigh. This story is about the Parker Solar Probe. This is a NASA spacecraft and it has just made history. Parker was launched in 2018. Since then, it has made 21 close passages to the sun, or solar flybys called perihelions. Each time, it has inched progressively closer. But this time, Parker surpassed the blistering speed of 692,000 kilometers per hour, breaking its own record as the fastest object ever made by humans. To put that in perspective, this is the equivalent of flying from London to New York in less than 30 seconds. At such a speed, Parker surfaced across the corona, not the virus of course. Corona is the sun's outer atmosphere. Parker braved blistering radiation, contending with temperatures nearing 1400 degrees Celsius, and flew to within 6.1 million kilometers of the sun. This is more than 7 times closer than any previous missions. With this, Parker has performed a record-breaking feat. The spacecraft has come closer to the Sun than any spacecraft has ever before, in what's being called the kiss of the Sun. But why does it matter? Why does NASA have to go through so much trouble to get closer to the Sun? For centuries, people have studied the star. We've read and talked about it, but despite the extensive research, many mysteries remain. Like, why is the Sun's corona so hot? And why is the inner surface even hotter at 6,000 degrees Celsius? Also, how does solar wind really work? Solar wind is the constant steam of charged particles bursting out of the Sun. These particles light up our skies with auroras. Scientists still don't know how these solar winds work and why they knock out our power grids. These questions need more than theoretical answers, and scientists say these mysteries can only be solved after actually experiencing the Sun and getting data from a probe that visits the Sun. So Parker is doing just that. It's interacting with the Sun's outer surface and bringing back some clues, hopefully. You see, Parker is burning hot on its flyby, so it's out of communication for several days. Scientists know that it has gotten close to the Sun, but they don't know whether it will survive. Parker is making hay while the Sun shines. It's expected to make at least 2 more flybys of the Sun, after which it will send a signal to the scientists on the 28th of December. Until then, Earthlings wait anxiously to see if Parker survives this challenge, hoping that the spacecraft doesn't fly too close to the Sun.
When the pandemic shut down the world, employees were suddenly able to work from home. A remote workplace was earlier unimaginable, but it became the new normal. 4 years have passed since then, and now the future of work looks very different again. Only about 1/10 of workers the world over are working in hybrid mode, meaning a combination of work from office and work from home. That's hybrid. 79% CEOs say that remote work will be dead within 3 years. Bosses are increasingly asking workers to return to their desks. But here's the irony. Many corner offices are still sitting empty because the option of work from home is still reserved for the privileged. And this is the great workplace divide. According to research, the number of days people are allowed to work from home correlates to their income. So higher earners enjoy more flexibility. Look at the $50,000 to $100,000 income bracket. Globally, out of all the people who fall in this range, only 38% workers can sometimes work from home. Compare this with employees that make $100,000 or more. 63% of them get the same benefit, and this gap only widens as you go higher up the ranks. And it is privilege pro max for the wealthiest among us. The top bosses, the company leaders, they may call workers to office, but many of them can still stay remote. The best example is Starbucks. The coffee giant made an announcement last year. It urged workers to come back to office. Not many paid heed. So this October, Starbucks doubled down. It warned its employees, return to office or risk being fired. Now, most workers cannot afford that. They cannot afford to lose their jobs, so they are coming back to work. But apparently their CEO, Brian Niccol, doesn't have to. Starbucks is headquartered in Seattle. Niccol lives in California. That's a 14-hour drive. Now, if you were in Niccol's position, what would you do? Move cities, right? Well, Niccol doesn't have to do that because Starbucks has given him a jet, an actual private jet to commute back and forth. That too just once a week. What about the other days? On the other days, Niccol works from his dedicated home office space. Now, this is a man who earns a base salary of $1.6 million. He received a $10 million bonus when he joined the company this year. So if someone can afford to move houses, it is Niccol. But this is not an isolated case, and this is not against Niccol. This is the trend. Look at Salesforce, the US software company. Earlier this year, it ordered employees to return to office, while the company's CEO, Mark Benioff, says, "I don't work well in an office." Well, that's convenient. Of course, he would much rather work from home, or should we say from his oceanfront properties in Hawaii. Yes, rules are different if you are a CEO, but data proves that the same rule should apply to CEOs, because according to research, it is the C-suite that is more ineffective when working from afar, not the foot soldiers. Now, a jet may close literal distances, but research says that the greater the distance between the CEO's home and company, the greater the gap in the company's performance. Yet the C-suite can ignore all of this. They can force workers to pack the cubicles because few will question an empty corner office, or what this means for the future of work.
मैं यहाँ से अपनी गाड़ी में गई इस्लामाबाद, वहाँ पे जो भेजने वाले था पेडलर जो था, मैंने उसको गाड़ी की चाबी हाथ में थमा दी। मैंने वहाँ पे उससे 50 ग्राम लिए और मैंने गाड़ी उसको वहाँ पे छोड़ दी। वहाँ से मैं हीरोइन लाती थी। इवन कि मतलब कोई भी ऐसी चीज़ नहीं होगी, मतलब इतना ये इंसान को मजबूर करता है ना कि मतलब हेल्पलेस इंसान इतना हो जाता है।
मैं आपको पर्टिकुलरली तो नहीं बोल सकता हूँ किसी कारणवश, बट ये है कि हाँ, महिलाओं के ज़रिए जो गाँव आगे हैं, वहाँ से कहीं ना कहीं से महिलाओं के ज़रिए आता है पीछे। ड्रग्स पे जितना कंट्रोल हो सके, जितना नहीं पूरा कंप्लीटली कंट्रोल होना चाहिए।
Are women easy drug mules? Are agencies less suspecting of women peddling drugs? Mere coincidence or a conspiracy? The pattern is definitely concerning, one that our security agencies are not neglecting. CNN News 18 reported in early 2024 on Pakistan's role in pushing narcotics into Jammu and Kashmir, highlighting involvement of overground workers in recruiting for this trade.
चाहे वो बच्चे हैं, चाहे वो औरतें हैं, चाहे कैसे भी करते हैं, उनको पता है आपके कोई भी हमारा दाव पेच जो भी है, उन्होंने हम सब भी हथकंडे इस्तेमाल किए, लेकिन इंशाल्लाह वो फेल रहे। ये जो यूथ है तो इसको भी उकसाने का मसला है। कोई स्कूल से है, कोई कॉलेज से है, कोई कहीं से है, किसी को पता ही नहीं होता, सिर्फ पैसों की लालच है।
Despite visible law enforcement actions, drug syndicates continue adopting new methods. This time around, we visited areas like Rajouri, Poonch, Doga, Anantnag and Baramulla that are revealing a significant trend: increasing participation of women in the illegal narcotics trade.
मिलिटेंटों को और उनके भेजने वालों को ये मालूम है कि हिंदुस्तान से जम्मू कश्मीर को पाकिस्तान नहीं छीन सकता। इस सब के लिए यहाँ का आदमी चाहिए, और यहाँ का आदमी उनके साथ वही जा सकता है जो कहीं मजबूर होता है। मिलिटेंट हमारे लिए इतना नुकसानदेह नहीं है जितना हमारे घर का एक लड़का भी अगर इस नशे की लत में फंस गया तो वो बगैर गोली के पूरी फैमिली को मार सकता है।
महिलाएं एक आसान सा टारगेट है और वो ये काम करती हैं, मगर हमारी पुलिस और ये जो एजेंसियां हैं ये पूरी तरीके से चौकन्ना है।
Since 2023, 3,190 cases have been registered and 4,536 individuals arrested in Jammu and Kashmir's crackdown on illegal narcotics. To disrupt supply chains, authorities invoked the PIT-NDPS Act, lending to 463 detention orders in 18 months. In Rajouri district alone, 27 cases have been registered and 39 arrests made in 2024, with several cases involving women.
अगर करना वाले जो है या वहाँ उस साइड वाले वो तो ईज़िली लाते हैं, लेकिन वहाँ से जो फिर दूसरे डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स में जो पेडलर्स लाते हैं, हम तो ठहरे छोटे मोटे करने वाले हैं, है ना। मतलब हम लाते 4 ग्राम 5 ग्राम जो केजीज में लाते हैं। कॉमन सेंस की बात है, जब तक उनको वहाँ पे मतलब किसी का सपोर्ट नहीं होगा, किसी के साथ बातचीत नहीं होगी, इतना इजी तो है नहीं कि ये आटे का थैला तो नहीं है ना इंसान हाथ में लेके थमा के चलेगा। मेरे साथ भी ऐसे कुछ थे पुलिस के, मतलब जिनको पता था कि मैं करती हूँ और उनको पता था ये यहाँ से आती है जाती है रोज, मतलब इसको लाना होता है 50,000 का भी, 10,000 का भी, 20,000 का भी। हाँ, इट्स मतलब कॉमन थिंग है। मैं भी उनको मतलब इवन के मतलब कभी कभार ऐसा होता था, फिर वो बोलते थे नहीं अब आप हमारे साथ एक सौदा कर लो, अगर तुम महीने में मतलब 4 लाख 5 लाख का लाती हो, चलो हमें भी 50,000 दिया करो महीने में। Yes, exactly. हाँ, बिल्कुल।
In past also we have done a lot of seizures. In past also 10 kg this narcotics was seized, and that was of high value. And he said.
Tomorrow is Christmas, which means today is the deadline for Secret Santa, the annual ritual where you're forced to buy gifts for co-workers you don't even know. It's a very challenging process. You can't go overboard, nor can you disappoint. It's all about buying that perfect yet random gift. Though some people take it too lightly, like this Secret Santa in Haryana, he got his co-worker a tub of curd as gift. Let's hope the real Santa is not as bad.
कोई तरीका है भीख मांगने का?
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. The remains of a 50,000-year-old baby mammoth were found in Russia's Siberia. In Japan, Santa takes a swim with penguins on Christmas Eve, and an Italian zoo brings holiday cheer with Christmas presents for the animals. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. The goal was to prop up the faltering communist government in Kabul. The invasion triggered a brutal, decade-long conflict with Soviet forces facing fierce opposition from Afghan Mujahideen fighters. Mounting casualties and economic strain eventually forced the Soviet Union to withdraw in 1989. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Как нашлась вообще, и со временем тайне сделала слушай мамонтенка, вот как раз ее сейчас видеть в движениях, пока еще не завершенных. Хочется отметить, что впереди, как уже упоминалось ранее, дальнейших каких-то открытий.
Более подробный рассказ Максим Башев, Красноярский район, на реке Ильяна, предыдущая работа.
В своей камере для широкой общественности.
Hello and welcome to the late night edition with me Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Big breaking news coming in at the top of the bulletin. A tragic accident from Poonch in Jammu and